Welcome in, College Baseball Central fans. This is the Best Coast Pod, brought to you by College Baseball Central. I'm joined today again by Pat Moen. Pat, how we doing today, man?
We're living it up, Mark. I'm back. I look forward to this every week, getting a chance to take some time and talk college baseball with you. It's always a good time.
Yes, it is. I love it, man. It's one of my favorite segments we get to do here is doing this Best Coast Pod, where we're going to talk about the West Coast baseball and college baseball. Man, it's back. This is episode 4 for us. We're really excited. We're gonna get right into our top 25. So I say this every episode. College Baseball Central does a big collective poll that we release every single Monday morning. It's like 6 a.m. West Coast time. It's early. It's when I wake up. But we release this out there as 20 plus writers. We all put into this. It's a big collective poll. Today we had Oregon State at number 3. Where did you have them, Pat? I personally have them at 4.
I like last week. I kept them right at number 3. So I think my top four was remain unchanged from the week prior. I went Wake Forest, TCU, Oregon State, and Arkansas.
Mine went unchanged as well. Mine went Wake Forest, TCU, Arkansas, Oregon State. So I didn't change much. I do believe that the Beavers are a top 5 team. And to see some polls without them being in the top 5 is just, it blows my mind at this point in the season. It's a long season. I know there's a lot of games left to be played, but this team feels like even if the pitching's not going to be there, they can hit. So I'm kind of surprised. Others receiving votes, and I know you and I both have this first team up a lot higher. UC Irvine, Long Beach State, Oregon, and UCSB. UC Irvine deserves to be in the top 25 at this point in the season, being undefeated, right?
I can't believe they're not. And
Yeah.
even with the amount, I know we've got a lot of guys and girls voting on our polls, but I've got UC Irvine at 17. That's a lot of votes for them to be getting still. And I get they're technically like the 26th team. They've got the most receiving votes.
Yeah.
Uh, but this UC Irvine team, they're undefeated. I think they're more than deserving that to get in the top 25 spot. And they've got a chance to prove it this weekend.
And they've played good teams. They've played well. Long Beach State got their first loss of the season, but again, this pitching staff's been good. Oregon lost 2 of 3 to UCSB, so it kind of split votes for both of those teams there. I get both those. I still had Oregon in my top 25, but Long Beach State is right there. I did end up putting a Dallas Baptist team in over Long Beach State. But I think these teams, they're deserving of votes. I think it's going to be more down the road for me. Did you have any of those other 3 teams ranked?
I had all of them but Oregon, and it really came down to I had UCSB at 24, and it came down to whether or not Oregon would get that 25th spot. Kind of same thing. I entered Dallas Baptist in, and I also gave Pitt a wink as well. I gave them my 25th spot. So Oregon for me, they're right there. If I had a personal like receiving votes, or I guess receiving consideration, it's Oregon right there, probably at that 26th spot.
Yeah, I know people want to say, oh, they didn't look at. Got to look at the conditions too. It was a horrible 34-degree weekend with snow coming down. It was not a good weekend for baseball. Yes, UCSB took care of business, and we'll talk about them here in a minute. But it still was not a great weekend for baseball. So I'm not putting too much stock in the Oregon offense struggles, especially
And they
since
wore
Sunday they
black
came down.
pants on Saturday, so they can't expect to go out there and win when they're wearing black pants. I mean, that's kind
Can't
of a
win when you're wearing
self-inflicted.
black pants. That's a college baseball thing. Can't win when you're black pants.
The black pant theory. Those that join follow along. We'll look in depthly at it.
It's definitely an indefinite losing record. It's got to be around 250 for the Black Pant country. It's not good look. It's not a good winning percentage either. Speaking of a team that wears some black though, that we really do love, Long Beach State, 8-1-1. They took care of business this weekend. They did get their first loss of the season, but they really haven't been that far off. They're a really good looking team. I love the pitching staff. I love what they're doing offensively. They get UCLA and Wichita State this weekend. What did you think about Long Beach State and looking forward for them?
I thought they looked really good, like you noted. Their first loss of the year, and it came to UCLA. I think this Tuesday night matchup, they're going to come out with a little bit of a vengeance, a chip on their shoulder, and they're going to look to take that right back from them against the UCLA team that we'll get into here in a little bit, but maybe didn't have the best performance over the weekend. And then Wichita State, a sneaky kind of team that can, if you don't, you look over them for a moment and they'll jump right up on you. Shocker is kind of the nickname for a reason. I think the Dirtbags have what it takes to take care of this, but this is a road series for them. So they'll be on the road in Kansas, which we'll see how Long Beach does out there in early March. But I like the Dirtbags. The pitching staff has looked tremendous so far in the season. And I trust them to at least go and take care of business. A sweep, especially on the road, is a lot to ask for in a tall order.
Yeah.
But I like this team against the Shockers.
I do too. I think 2 of 3 is more realistic. I'd love them to sweep out there. It's a good team. I think that they do beat UCLA on Tuesday. They should have beat them last Tuesday. This is a good Long Beach State team. I think that they've got a lot of tenacity. I really like what this team's doing. I really like the direction they're heading. And like I said, they're right on the outside of my top 25. But if they keep winning, if they take care of business, they get 4 this weekend, they'll be in my top 25. Santa Clara 6-4 now on the season. Pretty good weekend. It had a loss in there still, but this Santa Clara team, we like them. They're going to play Utah and UC Davis this week. A lot of love about the Santa Clara offense. The pitching staff's taking care of business too, but a lot to love on that offensive side, Pat.
Looking at this team and seeing 6-4 next to their name just doesn't feel right. And I know that 2 of those losses earlier in the season on week 1 to Arizona State, both tight games. They kind of got stymied by of course, fleeting the name of the second, the Friday night, Thomas Burns, Arizona State. You didn't know what you were going to see out of him. You had no film. You had nothing to go off besides his, Baseball America or perfect game stuff. And this team's had the offense to back it up since then. A midweek loss in there, and I thought they kind of had the chance to take all 3 from Washington this weekend. But what surprised me with this series with them at Washington this weekend was it wasn't the offensive output that I was expecting. It wasn't the way of winning that they have been doing all year, which is just bashing the ball all over the yard. And, thankfully for them, the pitching has been strong, but they haven't really needed it to be. Kind of the opposite this weekend. They needed the pitching to be good, as they didn't put up their typical offensive numbers, but things still went for them their way as they took 2 of 3 from the Huskies, just dropping that Sunday game.
Yeah, you got to feel pretty good if you're Santa Clara. Going out there and beating any Pac-12 team and beating them 2 out of 3 has got to feel really good, even if it is the struggling Huskies right now. But a 2 out of 3 going out there taking care of business, good thing for Santa Clara. Another team that's really taking care of business that we both love, that we already talked about in the top 25, should be ranked. UC Irvine goes out there and sweeps. They are undefeated this year, 9-0, screaming it from the mountaintops. They get Cal Baptist, 2 against Columbia, who's a very good Ivy League team. I love this Columbia ball club, and 2 against Fresno State. They got some challenges coming, but this UC Irvine team's for real, Pat.
They're here and they're not going anywhere. If you can pick apart their schedule if you want, it's not even very successful if you're trying to pick them apart, because some of the teams they've gone up against this year have looked really good to start the year in their own regard. As you noted, Columbia is a strong team out of the Ivy League. Maybe doesn't carry their name, doesn't latch on with some big time mid majors that there are. Fresno State does a little bit. They've got the national title in the pocket, and they've looked good to start the year. I think Fresno State, to me at least, currently is my Mountain West favorite. So the challenges ramp up a little bit here. I still think this Irvine team has what it takes to get through it. I think the offense is just clicking on all cylinders 1 through 9, and the arms are doing enough at this rate of the season to kind of carry them through to a 9-0. And I think they're good enough to keep that going through this weekend.
Absolutely. They got the arms. They got the hitting. Man, we keep talking about it. All those hitters coming back, and my goodness, they have just really torn the cover off the ball and really done the things they need to do to win. Speaking of winning, UCSB goes up to Oregon, takes 2 of 3. They still went 2-2 over the week because they ended up losing the midweek game there. This team is frustrating because they have the staff, they have the team to do it. They've shown they can do it. They went up and beat a good Oregon team at home. They get Villanova and then a 3-game set against UConn. This might be a little bit of a get right time, right?
I think it can be. I just can't figure this team out. I looked through it, and as I was going through the box scores this weekend, I was like, all right, the 2 games they won, they got an early lead. Maybe the pitchers were able to sit in, pitch a little bit more aggressively. Then I go back to their schedule and I go game by game, and there's no correlation. There is 0 to I don't have but I'm pretty sure it's a 50-50 split whether they've scored first or second and whether or not they're winning or losing. So it just seems like what Gauchos team are you going to get on that day or on that weekend? The good Gauchos team came up on the road when they weren't supposed to. They're supposed to host the series. Weather kind of changed that around. And they still played some pretty ugly weather, but they took care of business against a really good Oregon team. The pitching staff kind of finally showed why guys like Mark and myself and other guys around the country had this team so high up in the preseason. Both Friday and Saturday, they kept that Oregon offense, which, as we've talked about on this podcast, is loaded, really at bay, which was pivotal in them getting those 2 wins on Friday and Saturday. Sunday, different story, but that's to be expected with the caliber of that Oregon offense.
Yeah, Oregon's offense was going to come alive at some point, and UCSB has the starting pitching, and they kind of ran out of a little bit on Sunday. By Sunday time, they were out of their pitching, but it was still good to see UCSB take care of business against a really good Oregon team. I expect them to sweep this week against Villanova and UConn. It'd be great for them if they can go out there and go get those games. They get both those series at home, weather depending. Hopefully, they can get through those. A team that did struggle a little bit that we both love, San Diego, 5-5. They didn't play great this weekend after they've played some really good competition. They've beat some really good teams. They get San Diego State, and then they're at Dallas Baptist. Boy, that's a tough slate for San Diego.
It doesn't get any easier, which is tricky because, like you said, I love this team on a similar stroke, maybe not to the same extent with Santa Clara, but seeing 5-5 next to the San Diego team just doesn't feel right for me at this point of the year. But I mean, you hit on the head. San Diego State, big game. I think they were supposed to play earlier and it got rained out. I might be confusing. Yeah. There's like 4 San Diego teams here that are all floating around. So I might be getting it twisted. So they'll get a chance to go take care of business here. Should be a good one. I'll probably be tuned into that one for my Tuesday evening watching. But Dallas Baptist, they have kind of crept onto my radar, and they might be here to stay after what they did this past weekend. They looked excellent down in Texas this weekend. But yeah, as much like the Toreros, they got a bit of an uphill battle ahead of them this weekend. Can the offense keep clicking as it has been, as they did against Michigan? Or is it going to be something where we see a team that came out against Irvine, which maybe just weren't firing all their cylinders? Dallas Baptist has the guys to kind of stymie that offense, but we'll see what the Toreros can answer with.
Yeah, and it's going to be a big test for San Diego and see where they're at. It's a good preseason test here for them before they get into WCC play. Good to see San Diego going out there and going and playing the best in the country, and Dallas Baptist is in our top 25 for a reason. Portland, UP, the Pilots are 6-3. They are going to take care at Omaha, and then they get Creighton. Creighton's been good this season. Omaha has been hit or miss. Portland could go down there and show some stuff there and show that they really belong here, especially starting off 6-3. We love this Portland Pilot team. I know you're really excited to start watching some games at home for them. Pat, how much do you think this weekend matters for them, and how excited are you for this Portland team?
I think this is a huge weekend coming off of a sweep over Utah Valley. Say what you want about Utah Valley. A sweep's a sweep, no matter where you cut the cake. And the thing that really jumped off to me with this weekend sweep and how they took care of business is that it was the offense that did it. It wasn't the pitching that's done it, which we had seen primarily the first few weeks of this team. Nick Brink still looked good on Friday. His strikeout rate was up there as it has been all year. Saturday and Sunday guys maybe weren't as strong as they have been, but the offense fought back and stayed in it through all the games. A huge 5-run comeback on Saturday, and then they just took care of business any way possible on the third game of that series. Immediately off the bat, the Friday game, the Bats, like the first inning, they put up 6 or 7 runs. And speaking on that, watching the game, Utah Valley's park is beautiful to watch the game at.
Gorgeous.
The corners, especially down left field, looked a little short for me, but that might just be the giant mountains in the background playing a little bit of tricks on my eyes. But a really cool venue to watch a ball game out there, so something that made my list. But I thought Portland looked good. And they've got another great venue to travel to this weekend. They'll be at the Mecca of college baseball. But Creighton's a bit more of a task for them before they welcome Maryland at home.
Yep, it's a big one there, and can't wait. Pretty cool there. Seeing what they're going to do, taking care of business, and then they get Maryland at home, which I know both of us are going to be at that series. So pretty excited for that one. Washington State, 7-4. They've been a little hit or miss, but them to be at 7-4, it's still pretty good. A tough weekend. They didn't necessarily perform like they wanted to. They dropped a game to Rhode Island, dropped a midweek game. They could have beat TCU. They were in that game, so no reason to hang your head. The loss to Rhode Island is a little bit more puzzling when you've been playing so well, but it happens. It's baseball. It happens. Washington State, a good team still, though, right, Pat?
I didn't lose too much faith in this Washington State team, especially if I weigh how well they played TCU on Tuesday versus maybe how poorly is tough work, but how that game on Sunday went, losing 3-4 to Rhode Island. I hate when people put the losing score first, so I kind of just hate that I did that. But losing 4-3 to Rhode Island on Sunday, I think the Cougs have a great chance to bounce back this weekend, getting conference play started. I think Choate and the rest of this Cougar team is ready to roll. I mean, trying to watch that stream on Sunday, there was snow, there was rain. I'm sure it couldn't have been higher than 40 degrees out there. So maybe Rhode Island was somehow a little bit more prepared with the cold weather stuff out there. Cold up there, but it just gets as cold on the Palouse. So hopefully they can get catch a break down in Salt Lake. Uh, but I still love this team, and I still think that this weekend series coming up is a lot more intriguing than I ever could have anticipated it being 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, Utah 9-2. We'll talk about that right now. Utah, Washington State. I have them at Washington State this weekend, though. Let me check and make sure. I might be wrong there, but that's still either
Oh,
way. It's
you're
gonna
right.
be. Is it? It's in
You're right. I
Pullman.
got him in Pullman. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's gonna be a cold one in Pullman. Utah has quietly taken care of business. They've done the small things win game. They won with some long balls. They've won with some small ball. I'm impressed by how they just keep going out there and battling. But I'm super pumped for this weekend here. I think the Cougs take 2 or 3. Where are you at on this weekend series with Washington State and Utah?
It's such a toss up for me. I do have Utah taking care of business up there. I think that they were they were very close to taking care of business Sunday against Cal Poly and sweeping, which would have had this huge team sitting at 10-1. Which
Yeah.
I, I don't know what the odds would have been on that in Vegas, but I would have been afraid to touch them with a 10-foot pole. So kind of like I mentioned with when the schedule first came out, I kind of had this series circled and crossed out. I didn't really think I'd be paying too much attention to it, as these were two of the teams I had in the 10 and 11 in my power rankings last year. But this is a sneaky good series, and I think it's two very interesting brands of baseball on display. Utah is much more of a small ball. We're going to pitch, we're going to steal, and we're going to try and kind of just bleed runs off of you. Where Washington State has kind of came out and they've shown the ability to play against that. They took down Kentucky, and Kentucky is very much small ball oriented team that is just going to bunt and steal and advance runners and play the old fashioned way, so to say. So it'll be an interesting kind of dichotomy of two styles of baseball here going up on the Palouse. Something about this Utah team just has me kind of in a spell right now, so I got to stick with the Utes.
That's fair. If you were to tell me in the preseason that Utah has a chance to be the second team in the Pac-12 to get to 10 wins, I would have just shook my head at you and be like, "Get away, get out of my podcast." This is crazy. This Utah team has really played well, and Washington State's played well too. So going up there, it's going to be interesting with those two teams. Utah also gets Santa Clara at Santa Clara before they play Washington State. So we'll see how that one goes. Good for Santa Clara to get that one in as well. Cal 7-3. Man, they were rolling. This team was hot. And then they ran into a buzzsaw in Pitt, and Pitt has been a really good story this year. Really, really talented, and Cal didn't really ever recover in that game. They got down early, and that was all she wrote there. They get Stanford in a midweek game. This is just a midweek game. It doesn't have anything to do with Stanford standings, anything for the Pac-12. And then UCLA. UCLA is 5-5. They've been struggling. They haven't really done anything that we wanted to see from this highly touted team. UCLA gets Long Beach State, which we talked about. And then Cal at Cal. This is setting up to be all Cal, Pat.
Cal's got a big weekend/week full of opportunities for them. And kind of two different opponents coming in on two different strokes. Stanford just swept Rice, which we'll get into here shortly. So Stanford's got to be feeling good versus Cal, like you mentioned, tougher weekend. Going over two, they had that third game, got rained out. Ohio State sneakily has won 4 out of 6 games against Pac-12 opponents this year. Which is going through schedules. I had to stop and go research Ohio State for a moment. I'm like, how are they kind of doing this right now through the Pac-12? But the Cal offense is continuing to click. I think it's just going to need to be a more continual stroke, a more routine stroke, 1 through 9. PJ Moutsouris out of the 9 hole, he's still leading the team in average. Caleb Lomavita is finally above 500, or 400. But putting finally in that still seems kind of crazy, but that's what you expect from a bat. Kind of his stature. In UCLA, kind of a similar thing. They just don't kind of know who to pencil in at the moment. It feels like you just kind of see a constant rotation of guys. And unfortunately for UCLA, none of those guys are producing power. They've got a very small amount of home runs on the season. It's going to be something that they need to kind of find their stroke with a little bit and hit more balls for extra bases, not even out of the park, just extra bases, and get the few guys that you're currently getting on base, get them around the bases and get them in, get them on the board.
Yep. It's the same problem I talked about the last 2 years with this UCLA team. Too many singles, not enough extra base hits. That slugging percentage is way down. They're not driving the ball out of the ballpark. They're not hitting the gaps. They're not getting those doubles and triples to move guys around. two singles, in an inning doesn't score anybody. A home run and a double, you got opportunities. But when they're hitting all these singles and they're just finding ways to get on base, it's not scoring the runs that they need to have. The pitching's been okay for UCLA. I'm not totally sold that their pitching is struggling as much as their offense is. They won that extra inning game against Long Beach State. They scored 12 runs, but then after that, the offense has really not produced. And I need to see more from this UCLA team. This could be all Cal. I said that already. It could be an all Cal weekend. This could be huge for them if they can take care of business against Stanford. If they can go out and beat UCLA, that's a huge start to the Cal. Or this could be the other way where they don't win any of those games and now they're right back at 7-7, right where Cal has been the last few years. I don't expect that. I think Cal does go out and beat. I think they go 2-2 this week. But I want to see more from this Cal team, especially on the pitching side. They have the hitting. They're not hitting consistently the last couple days, but I do love this Cal baseball team.
Now, with that 2-2, I know I'm pulling this out of you. Does the loss come to Stanford, or is there 2 to UCLA?
I think they beat Stanford and they beat one. They take one. They do not win the weekend series against UCLA. I think that they only take one of
Yeah.
those games. I think UCLA kind of tries to get right here. I think UCLA also goes 2-2. I think that they lose to Long Beach State and then they take two from Cal. So
Yeah.
kind of the opposite direction for both those teams there. But I think they're both splitting this weekend. I'd love it if Cal won though. I'd love if Cal went 3-1 or swept this week. I'd be all for that. I'd be 100% for that Cal baseball team.
That's the favorite part of this time of the year is all three of those options seem like they could happen. When we record next Monday, however it is that weekend shapes up, I can't say I'm surprised, unless barring a 1-3 or an 0-4.
I'm with you. I really hope that this Cal baseball team steps up and does the right things this week. Speaking of a team that hasn't really done much right, both these teams, Washington is 3-5-1. They finally got a weekend win. They're not playing their best ball. They still can't hit. They can't hit in rhythm. They can't hit together. It's like one guy at a time does this thing. Washington's got to find answers, and it comes with an opening weekend against Stanford. Stanford did sweep Rice. Stanford feels like they've gotten a little bit going right now. They're 6-5. They get Cal for the midweek game, and then at Washington. This could be a lot for both these teams' seasons. If somebody really takes care of this one and pushes the other one down, it's really going to hurt the opportunities for either one of these teams, I feel.
Where I'm landing at on this one is I think both these teams are coming into this matchup off two very different weekends. Rice, we talked about it last week, not the team they used to be, not the program they used to be. But not only did Stanford go in their win, but their Friday and Saturday guys, the guys that we've talked about that they need to be competitive in Pac-12, went out and absolutely shoved. Matt Scott finally had the performance that we've been waiting on him to have this season. 12 strikeouts, 6 innings. And then Christian Lim followed it up the next night, and he went 6 innings with 10 strikeouts. That scares me if I'm a Husky fan, if I'm looking at that Husky lineup that has already struggled to put the ball in play, especially for base hits. If you combine a team struggling to get base hits with two guys that are missing bats at the moment and throwing strikes, recipe for disaster for the Huskies. At the same stroke, they were able to pull this potent offense in Santa Clara down. I don't want to say to their level, but they really kind of sucked the life out of that Santa Clara offense. If they can kind of figure out a way to really get a rock fight with the Stanford team, I think that Washington can find a way. But at the moment, for me, I can't believe I'm saying this so far at this point in the season, but I'm going to go with Cardinal to kind of take this one early in the year.
I want to believe in Washington, right? And maybe they go out and they take 2 hours of BP every day from now until Friday. They don't have a midweek game. It'd be great for them to go get some practice in. They need it. They need to get right. They need to flush this and really restart their season. They could change it right here, right? They could go back to a winning record if they go sweep Stanford. I feel like Washington's the better team. I feel like Stanford's playing better and feels a little bit better about themselves after the Rice series. I'm going to take Washington 2 out of 3, and that's just because I think that Washington does have the better athletes. I think Washington is better this year. But it's a tough show me series, and one of these teams is going to have to come out on top, and it could go sweep either direction. It wouldn't surprise me because both these teams are so erratic. But it would be great for either one of them, or it could be really abysmal for the other one that loses this series. It's not going to go well for whoever loses this one. Arizona, 5-6. They've been really all over the board. They've looked great games. And then that power hitting has missed and struck out 14, 15 times. They're 5-6. They get USC. USC is now 2-9. Now USC did not lose the weekend for me. They looked like they played the part. They lost all three games. They were in two of those games against TCU and A&M. Those are very good teams. This is a tough one for me. I feel like USC at home taking on this Arizona team should be the favorite. I'm going to take him, but where are you sitting on this one, Pat? USC also plays at Fullerton as their midweek.
Yeah, I think that is kind of a big part for me with USC this week is Fullerton's looked kind of shaky out of the gate so far. So I think if USC can jump on them and just get another win under their belt, it's now been over a week for them since they got their first two wins. They tallied over Portland 2 weekends ago. They had a brutal slate. I mean, TCU, A&M, TCU is a rough weekend for any team out in the country, and not too many of them will come out looking any different than USC did. So kind of like you said, it looks bad on paper, but really, I feel like they've kind of played to where I expected them, especially with the way they've started their season. In Arizona, on the same stroke, they played three ranked opponents as well in Indiana, Alabama, and Dallas Baptist. Two closer games earlier on the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and they took care of business with Indiana on Sunday. It's kind of a similar stroke. It's what version of this Arizona team are we going to get? And I think their offense, just has enough going for it that if they can get the arms, if Jackson Kent can kind of return to form that we saw really early in the season, and they can, quote unquote, as I was kind of very much so feeling with the staff, pitch backwards through their rotation, I think that they can really kind of settle into a groove here with this Trojans team on the other end of the field and take this weekend series.
I'm pretty excited, honestly, about that Aoki and Kent first game on Friday. These are
Yeah,
two guys that, Aoki, tons of praise. Everybody loves what he's done. He hasn't really got the wins out there, but he's a great pitcher. And you got to throw him up against Kent, who's been really good and kind of mediocre, but I think that he has that really good stuff. I'd love to see this Friday matchup. I'm excited for this one. I think that USC takes 2 of 3 at home, and they could sweep. But that Friday night matchup is one to watch for. I'm excited for that one there. Arizona State, 5-6 now. They got swept over the weekend, and they really didn't look like they were in any game. Thomas Burns didn't throw bad on Friday against A&M. It's a very good A&M team, but they got shut out. The offense that had been on fire got extinguished by the alternating of A&M, TCU, A&M. They take on Oregon. Oregon lost 2 of 3. Oregon's going to play 5 games this week. They got 2 against Grand Canyon, and then they're playing at the Arizona State there. Arizona State has UT Arlington, and then Oregon. This is 2 teams that are really competing to be in the top echelon here of the Pac-12 this year. Oregon on the road at Arizona State. I guess it depends on what kind of offense Arizona State shows up, but I feel like Oregon needs to go down there and win this series.
yeah. For some reason, this feels like a little bit more of a who's going to want it more series, and to me, that's Oregon. I think, especially with kind of how things panned out for them over the weekend, with two kind of really getting stymied in those first 2 games that they had against Santa Barbara. For Arizona State, you mentioned it. I mean, tough opponents. First off, they played the same kind of slate that USC did, and with A&M and TCU switched around. They held A&M to only 4 runs on that Friday game. The problem is they didn't score any, which is really out of character for this Arizona State team. Can they bounce back and put those runs up back at home against this Oregon team? To me, I think that Oregon staff has the ability to shut down this Arizona State offense, maybe not in the same way that A&M did on that Friday night and keep them to 0 runs, but at least they can keep them down enough to let that Oregon offense get back to form. They tore it up on Sunday. I think they can roll that over and go down into the desert and take care of things against Arizona State.
Yeah, I feel like this is Oregon saying, okay, we're starting Pac-12 play. We need to be right. I am excited for Friday again. That's R.J. Gordon versus Thomas Burns. It's going to be a great matchup there. And it's really going to show up whose offense shows up, because the pitching staffs we know for both teams are pretty good. It's whose offense is going to show up and actually and push the other one out here. I think I like Oregon again this weekend, but it's really tough there with Arizona State. I like both those ball clubs. Oregon State is the one left out. They don't play any Pac-12 opponent this week with the 11 Pac-12, thanks to Colorado being undefeated. They get Cal State Northridge, and we talked about this in an earlier podcast. This Cal State Northridge team is very good. But this is good for Oregon State to kind of go out there and get healthy, still get some of these guys back, and give more guys opportunities to go out there and play again at home in front of the Goss faithful. I love Oregon State. They swept last weekend against North Dakota State. It wasn't always pretty, but in that weather, going out there and getting wins is getting wins. 34 and snowy, and winning is still a win.
Yeah, and it looks like the only thing different from last weekend to this weekend is it might be a little bit warmer. It looks like the rain's still going to be coming down on the Goss faithful. In this CSUN team, as you noted, they're on an 8-game winning streak. They've looked good to start the season. In a perfect world for me, if I was calling the shots, obviously I don't know the extent of his injury, but this is where I'd like to see Aiden May make a return in that Friday night spot, get him against a team that is good, that will hit him around if he keeps things too much over the plate or if he just doesn't have his stuff with him that night. I think this is a bit of an easier return, or not easier return, but more worthwhile return than say North Dakota State would have been.
Yeah.
I still believe that Oregon State's got all the tools and the guys to take all of the games this weekend that they've got coming up, but it is more of a challenge. Again, I don't know the extent of some of the injuries with McDowell and Casper, but would really love to see those guys kind of worked back in this weekend as well. As this seems kind of like a perfect little ramp-up series into getting Pac-12 play started.
Absolutely. I think that they try to go get some guys some innings. I think that they go out there, even if Aiden May were to come back and throw 3-4 innings, just to kind of keep the arm warm, do those kind of things. It'd be good to see him get out there and go get those, maybe even 5. It just kind of depends on how it goes. Weather is concerning for me. So if you have an arm injury and it's not serious, even that weather and that coldness, maybe you sit out another week. But if he's feeling good and the bullpens look good this week, give him an opportunity to go out there and throw on Friday against a very good CSUN team. All right, Pat, who's your winner of the week? Team winning of the week.
My team taking it this week for me is the Gauchos in UCSB. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we've been waiting, I know Mark and I especially, for this team to kind of come up and live to their fruition that we saw in day one of the season when they put a 20 spot on Campbell, and also that we talked about in the preseason. This is a team that pitching staff is their strength and is their backbone. And if they can go out and keep teams, especially in their conference, if they can have similar performances from the top of the rotation guys that they had against Oregon, I think this UCSB team can vault themselves into a really, really strong position in the Big West as they get going there.
Absolutely, I think that they're put up, and it's time to put up or shut up, and they took care of business against Oregon, and now they get Nova and UConn. They could really make a run here and put themselves at a big winning percentage. We'll see what they do. Mine's UC Irvine, staying undefeated and beating some good teams along the way, beating UCLA. I really like what this UC Irvine team has done. They've done it offensively, and it hasn't just been offense like we all thought. We thought maybe they're just going to out-hit every team they play. They're also playing good defense. They're also pitching. They're doing the things they need to do to win baseball games, and they should be a top 25 team, no doubt in my mind. Who was your underperforming team of the week? The team that just didn't quite meet your expectations?
It's kind of tricky as I was going through. Not too many teams, especially that we covered on the Pac-12, especially had winning records over the weekend or throughout the week. So I ended up settling with UCLA just because I think they had the ability and they have the talent, and they've shown that they have the talent to do a bit more than they did this past weekend. I toyed with the idea of USC just because the 0-3, but I think USC performed exactly how we expected them to perform that week. Where UCLA dropping the game to Irvine there, and then also dropping the game to Michigan, who other teams in the Pac-12 and Big West have beaten, I think is just a tricky one to look at. The team's starting to slide a little bit in my power rankings just because there is no consistency. There's no kind of future direction right now at the moment. So kind of weighing all things against each other, I ended up landing on UCLA as my underperformer this week.
That's fair, because I think that we expected them to maybe go out and take care of business, maybe win all 4, and they didn't do it. 2-2 over the weekend. A team that I really was hoping was going to do one, at least take one of these games, was Arizona State. I wanted to see them bats get going, man. And Thomas Burns going out there on Friday and competing and doing all the right things, and then getting 0 run support was really kind of the start of the bar for me this weekend when I looked at this Arizona State team. I wanted more. I expected more. I've been really high on this Arizona State team. I wanted them to go out there and compete. and it never really felt like the offense ever got going and ever competed this week. So it's really disappointing to see that. I think that there's big things on the horizon for this Arizona State team, but this one really hurt for me.
That's up there for
Uh,
me as well, because I talked about last week how I thought that there was a chance that this Arizona State team could take all three.
yeah.
And then on the flip side, to go on with three, my big reasoning there was that their offense could just power them to it. Yeah, that just wasn't the case this past weekend with some of the arms and the performances they put up.
Yeah, and it's not like TCU's necessarily held teams down, and they held down Arizona State, and that was just like, oh
Yeah.
man, that was a tough one for me to watch. Who are you giving props to this week, player or coach? Anybody you thought that stood out for you this week on the West Coast?
I want to give a quick honorable mention because I almost slotted them in. The reason I didn't slot them in was just a comparison of who the opponent was. But Christian Lim, a true freshman on the farm in Stanford, I wanted to give him a nod. Talked a little bit earlier about his line: 6 innings, 10 strikeouts, 3 hits. Was kind of the catalyst there on Saturday to help Stanford take their first series of the season. But the guy that I'm going to give my tip of the cap to is going to be Matt Ager out of UC Santa Barbara. He's not had the start to the season I think he was expecting, and I think that many of us around the country were expecting from him. So for him to go out on Friday night and one of Oregon's, they had Lafayette last week, but I think this was a big time series for them to host at PK. A lot of hopes up for them. For him to go out and go 6 1/3, striking out 8 and only giving up 1 run against an Oregon offense that we've talked so highly about on this podcast, and that was one of the main reasons I had them in the top 25 last week. Was really, really impressive for me. And if he can continue to build on that, then he might be finding himself in this segment more often than not.
Absolutely, it was impressive, and big thing, big time step up, going out there and taking care of business. He is an All American preseason guy. He could be that first team All American pitcher. You've seen it now this week, and he really did go out there and take care of business. And no earned runs was huge for him against Oregon, especially against a team that had been crushing the ball in that small little ballpark there at Oregon. PK Park's a good ballpark to hit in, and he said, "Not today." Mine's Caden Kindle for the Anteaters, man. I mean, he is just taking care of business. He's hitting 478 this year. He's leading the team in RBIs. He's not leading in slugging, but he hit his first home run of the season. He really is doing all the things that he needs to do. 478 is a good average, and really just taking it on for this team. And he says, let's go. We're going to be undefeated. We're just going to keep winning ball games and then let the rest of it take care of itself. Really like what Caden Kindle has done for this Anteater Ball Club there at UC Irvine. Big props to them. Pat, final thoughts for the week before we head into some opening Pac-12 play.
That's pretty much it. Is it for the Pac-12? We made it. We are here to conference play. We can finally see these guys go head to head with their Friday, Saturday, Sunday guys with their weekend rotation. I know we'll get a little sneak peek, a little teaser of Cal Stanford on Tuesday, but it's starting to go. I know my West Coast fans and my Big West fans, we've got a little bit longer to go before we get into the conference play. But this just kind of solidifies to me that the season, we're not in the early whims of the season anymore. We are in the heart of it. The rubber is meeting the road, and starting to matter, starting to really matter for some of these teams around the country. So no more flukes.
100%. It's into it. It is the final season of Pac-12 play as we know it, and it's the very first weekend of it going right here. I couldn't be more excited and sad at the same time, but I cannot wait for some of these games. The pitching matchups are interesting. The hitting for these teams, I'm so excited for Pac-12 baseball to finally be underway and getting going here. I don't know which series is my favorite. I really think Oregon, Arizona State could be the one that is the most important this weekend. But there's some really good ones, and Utah could get to their 10th win. Utah could get to win 10 before any other team in the Pac-12. I never thought I'd say that this year, so I'm
That
excited
might
for
be the
those
one that
teams.
gets the streaming preferences for me up there at Bailey Brayton. Might be Utah Wazoo, just because I don't know the next time I'll be able to say that I've got Utah Wazoo on the television.
I know I was actually checking out to see how far that is up to Wazoo for me to see for that drive here from Bend, but I'm gonna keep it open on the weekend and maybe get up there for a game, but I'm not saying anything at this moment. All right. Well, thanks for joining us here on the Best Coast Pod, brought to you by College Baseball Central. For Pat Moen and myself, we appreciate you guys coming out. We're going to drop this every Wednesday is the plan. So we record it on Monday and drop it for you guys Wednesday. Again, if you guys have any questions you guys want to shoot us, shoot it out to our Twitters there, or shoot it out to the main account there at College Baseball Central. Check us out. We got lots of stuff going on. We got the Texas pod. We've got the SEC pod coming. We got the ACC pod going. We got lots of stuff. We got you covered West Coast to East Coast for college baseball. Thanks again for joining us. Pat, let's have a great week.
Let's do it. We'll talk to you guys next week.